Hey, Lama Chili, how are you doing?
I'm great, Lama. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. Quite all right. Quite all right. Thank you.
This is recording, so let's make our interview.
Excellent. Only bit of advice, just do it as you would do it with any interviewer. I'm going to be like, oh, this is all new for me, and uh, don't stop for anything. Just as you would, right?
I've never had an interview before, so this will be my first time.
Well, I'm glad we can do it both of us together before, and it's not like crashing into another guest. So just before we start, can you hear me correctly?
Yeah, this is fine.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Welcome to Mantras and Magic, where enlightenment meets enchantment. Today, our guest, Lama Fede. Lama Fede, we've heard so much about you, but now here we are to find out for ourselves. No more rumors, no more shadow internet memes. Let's just have a real one-on-one. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me here.
Let me ask you, Lama Fede,
Mhm.
known for many different things, but today I want to ask you about lucid dreaming and other names of this type of dream yoga, astral dreaming, lucid dreaming. People know these things by various names, but I'd
Mhm.
like to talk to you about this today.
Okay. Okay. What would you like to know?
First, how did you get involved? What's your background with this? What started you on this path?
Well, let me recap a little bit. I started having lucid dreams. I mean, it's kind of a mixed background. On one hand, it's a familiar background. My family from Argentina, we're all Guaranians, right? So in our culture and tradition, there is this figure of the paye, which is essentially a sham, kind of a sham. And it's very common that usually this is a family thing. So when I was younger, my father had a lot of lucid dreams. He didn't call them lucid dreams, he just called them vivid dreams in a way, right? Oh, I had this vivid dream, he would say. And kind of my family had this. And when I was growing up, I did train in shamanism in the South American shamanism, mostly Guarani and Andean shamanism. But because of the colonization by Spain and by Europe, there is sadly big gaps in their systems. Or it is kind of welded together with Christianity in a way. And one of the things that suffer most is the dreaming practices. So I turned to other things. And at that time, my teacher, who passed away in that moment, he told me, go like go check other systems. And somehow or another, I ended up in Buddhism from the psychoanalytic university. I was doing a degree in psychoanalysis. Then I left that. That was a bachelor's, and then I came back to do my master's. My master's is on psychoanalysis. So I started having this kind of interest. But then the Buddhism that I first arrived to, was Zen Buddhism, which doesn't really have that much background in it. So I kind of kept from my academic side. Then when I finished my master, I did my doctorate in educational sciences and social sciences, right? And I kept researching about it. But sometime after that, I learned about Tibetan Buddhism and that it had a particular dream yoga. So I kept training in Buddhism. I switched over to Tibetan Buddhism. I learned the dream yogas, and at the same time, I kept the research and practice of the, let's say, more Western version that is derived from Stephen LaBerge, and there's other authors that I was later to learn that they were derived by a lot of dream yoga from Tibetan side. So in a way, it kind of converged. And today I'm a researcher at the University of El Salvador and specializing in the area of dream research and especially dream research in relationship to Buddhism and yoga.
That's an incredible background. It seems to span Occidental and Oriental persuasions. So you shared your background. Thank you for that because I think a lot of people want to know more about all the different sides that you speak from. Let me ask you this. For someone who's new and who doesn't really know anything about lucid dreaming, what would you kind of say to get them started? Because you yourself talk about having had a little bit of a background and moving on. But for someone who's coming out of left field, what can you say to start them?
Well, I would say that lucid dreaming, it's a particular kind of dream. It's a dream in which you know that you are dreaming. And this knowing that you are dreaming changes the dream itself. Now, for a lot of people, they might get what is called pre-lucidity, in which you can kind of tell that you're dreaming, but it quickly slips away from you. Lucid dreaming is the art and the practice to stay in that space, in that uncomfortable space in which everything becomes a little bit too intense. And if you can't remain, you from there can guide your dreams. There is a lot of books that talk about controlling your dreams and controlling your mind. I do not think that that is quite correct. I think that one can guide the course of a lucid dream, but because one is in a dream, essentially everything that one experiences is one's mind, right? So for me, if you have to kind of give a quick definition of it, would be that lucid dreams are dreams in which you know that you're dreaming and they're a little bit more intense. But at the same time, they provide a gateway to understand your mind, your psyche, right? In a much deeper fashion than normal dreams.
Okay. What technique would somebody do to start with, especially if someone has either very little dream recall or perhaps they don't really know they're lucid dreaming or they don't come from a background to be kind of aware of these type of techniques, let's say. So what would you say is a starting foundational practice?
Well, I think that there's a couple of ways in which you can approach this, right? There is not like the one way in which I'm going to say, hey, this is the technique and everyone's going to be this work. It depends on the person. Having said that, I'd like to approach it from several sides. I like to divide the practice in three segments. One, as you mentioned, is the practice of dream recall. That is absolutely key. And dream recall is the ability to remember dreams. And it's a learned ability. Now, in Freudian psychology, we talk about the primary process and the secondary process. The idea is that the primary process is the process when one dreams, and that also gets another, let's say, division, which is called the secondary process, which is the waking process. And there is this small, like, very porous door between them, but you can learn to bring things from the dreaming into the practice. So my first advice, first practice, dream recall. Whenever you wake up at the morning, if you can, don't rush out of the bed. Try to go to sleep with some time and have a dream diary or dream journal just behind your bed and write all the dreams. There is a lot of books on how to do this, and I'm going to recommend a couple of them if you like at the end. But the main thing is, on one hand, you work on your dream recall. On the second hand, you also try to read a lot about this and try to get a lot of excitement about the possibilities. Because a key component of this is excitement and commitment to do this. This is something that is very is very against the or not or day-to-day life, right? We're trying to become aware in dreams, and it's not going to be a lot of compatible with, Instagramming into the bed until one falls asleep. You need like a regular sleep pattern. You need you need basically to commit to it. And in Buddhism, this is done through Guru Yoga, which is the great pill that helps everyone in these kind of things. You pray to the Guru, but because we're talking about general people, we might not have a guru. You might not have an idea what Guru Yoga is. So build up excitement. And the third thing I would really recommend to everyone is some kind of mindfulness meditation. There is specific techniques to meditate on dream content that you can learn, but even if it's just like regular mindfulness, the mindfulness you can get from the MBSR, it's going to be a great boon, especially if done just before going to sleep.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how a person might get started with mindfulness to affect their capacity to do this kind of dream technique or lucid dreaming?
So sure, there is. Let me talk a little bit about, and this is going to be mostly exoteric techniques. Anyone can do them, right? So my first advice is learn mindfulness by itself, right? There's a lot of courses. I would recommend very much Dr. Palu's 8-week mindfulness course, which is wonderful. But you can take any mindfulness course of the thousands that there are. Once you learn enough to be able to become aware of your thoughts without reacting, what you do is you sit before going to sleep and you try to relax yourself. You put an alarm for, let's say, 20 minutes before going to sleep, right? And you sit. It's important you do not lay down. But if you are not accustomed to meditation, you can kind of lay back to the wall or to any kind of cushion that you have, but do not lay completely down. And it is you're going to try to kind of fall asleep sitting. What this is going to happen, you're going to start seeing like small flashes or geometric figures that appear in front of you. These are part of what is called the hypnagogic process. There's two processes, the hypnagogic and hypnabombing, which means that one kind of the waking mind is basically becoming asleep, right? So what you do is when the alarm sounds, you wake up without moving very much. You draw or you record in any way you can use a recorder or diary or whatever you like, the figures that appear to you. And then when you go to sleep, you try to remember those figures as you're falling asleep. And this will help you start seeing those figures. The trick now is to remain relaxed in mindfulness of the figures without just as thought in mindfulness, without being sucked in. And when I mean sucked in, I mean in the literal sense. If you do this correctly, you will find that there is a tension, something that pulls you into the dream. You must remain calm in that situation and just let it go without pulling you. And if you can do that, you can start by dreaming and start with a lucid dream right away. This is a very simple technique. There's a lot more complex techniques, but essentially you meditate, you record in any fashion the figure. Then when you go to sleep, you recreate the figure and you let it drive you to sleep.
So interesting. I think if everyone tries this technique, we might have some good results from this. But let me ask you, now that you've given us the technique, um, what about, I guess, misconceptions or blocks that people have? Like, how do we address that for skeptics? 'Cause you've laid out a technique, but surely there will be people who are just deniers of all this. Now, you study this from a psychoanalytic process of the mind, hypnagogic
Mhm.
process. So what would you say to people who are kind of skeptical of this?
Well, there lucid dreaming as a field now it's being quite well regarded. It's not something that you're going to find people say no, this not exist. Of course, you always can find people like that, but from LaBerge and Weirmerk, which is a great pioneer in the UK, and there has been a lot of studies of people kind of doing Morse codes with their eyes because the eyes, when you fall asleep, are the only part you can move, right? In a voluntary fashion. And there is a lot of later studies, like 2019, there's one from Sweden about MRI scans of people having lucid dreams, and they show every part of the brain but the precordial and frontex alight. So essentially, they are awake, but without the prefrontal cortex. So there's a lot of, let's say, scientific evidence that this happens. Besides that, if you're talking just for a psychoanalytic point, what is interesting is that, well, it's not part of the general psychoanalytic theory, Freud himself mentions that this is possible because in two of his books, in Interpretation of Dreams and Beyond the Pleasure Principle, he talks about a book that he never mentions exactly by name, but you can piece together that is Marquet de Herby Saint Denis on dreams and how to guide them, which is the first Western manual of lucid dreaming. The problem is, Freud knew that this was possible, Freud got reports that it was possible. He even reports a pre-lucid dream himself, but he never got access to the book or the teaching. So he leaves it in, I know it's possible, but I don't know how, right? that's that's the thing. But that, because he didn't include it, has become kind of something that again fall into the realm of myth magic. But I would say that now that in the 2025 where we record this, it's pretty well proven. There's loads of things you can look out for. There is a couple of books by Charles Corey, which there is one which is Lucid Dreams: A Beginner's Guide, I think it is, which is great in the sense that it has for every single chapter like 10 studies. Right? This is the yeah, this is so it's very difficult to argue point in that sense. Now, having said all of this, if you there's one block that you mentioned that it's very possible to have. If you don't think that this is possible, you're probably not going to try it. The truth is that because it is something that's so counterintuitive and as I said, counter your everyday life, and it requires you to pay attention to areas of life that you are accustomed to not pay attention that if you don't believe in it, unless you have the good luck and everything aligns and one day you have one lucid dream, you're not going to believe. And therefore you're not going to make the effort. That's the truth. If that's the case, my advice to those people is to talk with people they trust and ask them if they had this kind of experience. And you will find that in my experience in the general population, I would say that 1 in 10 people had already a lucid dream. They may not know how to do it. They may not know it's a lucid dream, but they will tell you because it's a very intense experience. So they will tell you, oh, yes, I had this. I had this. And once you start seeing the statistical possibilities, you at least start thinking, hey, this might be witchcraft. This might be, I don't know, a sickness, whatever it is, but possible it is. It's not impossible. And that's already like a first step. Still, I would say that I would never lead teaching people meditation or something like this with lucid dreaming because it is a high commitment kind of technique. You need to change a little bit on your habits, you need to change a little bit other things. Therefore, it's less likely that someone who doesn't believe in it and doesn't want would try it. It's a lot easier to get them hooked with 5 minutes of meditation, right? Or yoga, in which they can see it's easier to see the change on the person, right?
So, since you're saying maybe start with mindfulness for a person who is kind of blocked or struggling, this kind of tells us there's a good journey to happen, not just go from 0 to 100 in a day. So, if I
Oh
were
yeah.
about journey, tell me how your own techniques might have changed from beginning till now. Because now you're an expert on this topic. So, what was the difference in the beginning for you?
Well, at the beginning, and this was because I'm a little bit old. Well, not a little bit, quite old. This was before the internet and everything else. I didn't have a lot to go on, to be honest. I mean, I had like my father and my grandmother tell me, "Hey, this happens to us all the time," but they didn't have an idea how to control it, and they thought it was like something in their blood. This kind of discourse that happens with traditional lines of shamanism, right? And then when I started learning a little bit about it, the people who taught me, especially the shamanic teachers, they didn't quite have an idea. They have better ideas, right? In a way. Like, for example, there is plant spirits that may help you, and you pray to them to have the dreams. But still, the techniques, that's what I meant when I said the gap, right? The techniques were a little bit different. So, what happened is that when I started practicing with the lucid dream crowd, and especially with the dream yoga crowd, that's the Tibetan way, that got I saw the difference in technique, the difference in especially in conceptual frameworks. It is very well developed there compared to the older kind of, which is kind of take this plant, pray that it happens, right? So what I would say for someone starting is, first of all, there is a complete set of techniques, there is a complete set of concepts that you can learn, and it's not something haphazardly that you do it and sometimes it happens. So you can learn to do it. I would say that pretty much at will. There are days when you're very tired, and even if you want to, you just kind of fall asleep. That's okay. When you're sick, also, depending on the sickness, there are sicknesses that actually help you, like like fever, like flus. Flus are great for dream yoga practice, strangely enough. But there are others that essentially will just drop you almost dead, and that's okay. But besides those extremes, there is techniques which allow you to have at least one lucid dream per night, probably more. The trick for me is to understand that whichever system you're going to go, with the more westernized system or with the more um, Tibetan system or with other systems of dream yoga, that there is a lot. There is Malaysian systems of dream yoga. There's a great number of them. There's Chinese systems, right? Within the Maotian school of Taoism. But whichever, it's going to take some doing. So what I would start by doing is the first step would be to start going to sleep on a regular basis. And this is probably the worst thing to say to a lot of people, but you're not going to be able to have dream yoga unless you have a regular cycle of sleep. And the second thing is work on your dream recall, work on your meditation, and especially get into the feeling that going to sleep it's something valuable. At the very least, the good thing that dream practice is going to give you is that you're going to have a better sleeping pattern. And this by itself, it's very good because it improves your health, it improves your energy, right? But also you have to know that there are things that they're better not to do, like reading screens. I have seen that there are young people who kind of read their phone in their bed. This is going to be a no-no. So you have to understand that this is going to work in that sense, and that's the direction. Once you see the value of it, once you have one or two lucid dreams, it's not going to be a problem. You're just going to drop everything and go to sleep very happily. But until that happens, it is a little bit of struggle. So my advice is I would focus on systems that have very defined both concepts and techniques and slowly go from there.
So a methodology and a plan. That sounds that sounds better for someone who's completely new to this to rather just jump in. I like the fact that there's steps for them, which leads me to ask you, when will you give your next Dream Yoga class and teaching for anybody who's interested in learning this discipline?
So dream yoga probably never, right? Never I'm going to give the dream yoga openly. It's going to be part of the teachings of the teachings that we do in the in our curricula in Buddhism, right? So dream yoga, it's another thing. Dream yoga is part of the different yogas of Buddhism. There are very advanced yogas. There's not something like you can go and do them. I know that there are people like doing saying, "Oh, come dream yoga class." I don't want to speak ill of anyone. I'm just going to say that myself as a teacher, I've been teaching for 30 years. I've been researching this for more than that. I I do not have confidence that I can take someone from the street and having had, let's say, 2 weeks practice and get them to have a solid dream yoga practice. I do not have this confidence. Other people may, other people may be able to. Myself, I cannot. What I can do is get them through a program that usually takes 3 to 5 years, right? That depends on the speed of which you do it, in which you learn all the different parts, the different meditations, different. And then what you happens is that when you get to the point where you're practicing doing yoga, everything kind of clicks into place. It's like I would say like being a fighter, right? Like an MMA fighter. You need to learn about grappling. You need to learn about striking. You need to learn about submissions. You need to have like physical energy and stamina and strength, right? And for me, I cannot take like a guy out of the street and make them into the next Khabib in 2 weeks. What I can do is I can get them like a program that say Monday you'll do, I don't know, weight training. Tuesday you'll have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And in that way, with time, they will get it. Now, what we can do, what we often do, we do classes on lucid dreaming, which is the more Western part. We usually do this once a year. We don't do this more because we tend to find that it you need time to develop. You need time to develop. So we usually do it once a year. Last year we did it, I think, on June or July. So we probably are looking for that time. But just to clarify, to make sure that I'm completely clear and manage expectations, this is not the dream yoga of the Tibetan systems. This is the lucid dreaming system of the Laberge, well, modified by all the things that we have learned since then, right? But it's the lucid dreaming yoga that I teach and practice. And if just as a corollary to this is often also what I teach in corporations, right? When people need to have more of kind of a more creative lifestyle, there is a variant that we teach in corporations that has to do with creative dreaming, which is a subset of lucid dreaming, and it's easier to teach and to learn. But it's still even the easiest part. It usually takes around 3 months for you to get good and at having creative dreams at will, so to speak.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that because, of course, I'm sure people would love to drop in and become a master in a week.
I wish I could do it. I would be like the happiest people ever. I would be rich also. It's like if you could come and I was like, oh, do this and you, that would be amazing. That would be amazing. There's people who always say, oh, what do you offer? I would love you, but it's like taking money because of name. I remember once I had this person who shall remain nameless. Like my first contact with Dream Yoga was abroad. There was this guy who was a translator, and I didn't know anything. It was like my first contact with Tibetan Buddhism, and he was like, "I'm going to teach you Dream Yoga," and I was like, "Oh yeah, sure." So it was like very expensive, at least for me at that moment. I was like a penniless wanderer, and it was this guy bringing a dream yoga manual and reading a literal transcription of everything. And I was like, I don't have the faintest idea. Move the wings into the third and then twist the channels. I was like, what? What is he talking about? And he was like, any questions? And I was like, yes, 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 please, please. And he was like, oh, we're out of time. See you soon. No way. I never felt more ripoffed like that. Well, I felt ripoffed other times, but that was probably one of the worst. So my idea is that if people come, they should expect that this is going to take some work, but at the same time, it is incredibly rewarding. It is absolutely rewarding.
Thank you for that. What's your parting advice? Just one piece of practical encouragement you could tell people about who want to either explore lucid dreaming or deepen their practice now?
Well, I would say there's this a couple. I would say in two parts, right? For the people who want to explore, the people who want to explore, first advice is everyone spends a third of their life dreaming. And what you do in dreaming, it also is reflected into life. This is a basic insight of about Buddhism and psychoanalysis. So it is a vital part for you to know your dreams. I'm not talking about taking control of them, which as I discussed, it really doesn't matter to me, but to know them and to become friends with them, right? To become friendly because your dreams are part of you, right? At least get to know them and get friends. This will change your life in a way which you cannot imagine. But let me give you a brief advice. Imagine that instead of going to sleep every single night, you could somehow magically spend 8 hours per day every single day in the gym. You'd be like the jacket, most jacket people ever, right? That would be amazing. So it's the same amount of time which you have. You can do it, and while it's not easy at the beginning, the benefits are tremendous. So that's advice for the people who want to, right? For people who already have sometimes, my best advice would be join a community. It doesn't matter if it's an online or an offline. It doesn't matter if it's exactly the kind of lucid dreaming or astral projection, which is a lot of people kind of confused, but that's okay. Join a community of people because the most difficult aspect, unless you're like a very small percentage of people who are like self-motivated, but in my experience, the most difficult aspect to keep this practice is to actually have the desire to do it. Especially when you are not 100% stable, when you're still deepening your practice. So you have a couple of lucid dreams, then you don't have them for a week, then you have a couple more, then you don't have them for a week. Because you already know them, you want to keep going, but it's difficult to keep going if the only person you have to rely is you. The good thing is you don't have to rely on you yourself alone. Join a community, talk, discuss, hate some people. It doesn't matter. You're going to find assholes everywhere. So that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly okay. But share knowledge, share experiences, try to do strange experiments. Let's meet all in a dream. Let's build something in a dream. This is something that is often done in some practices in which you build a common space, which everyone can access, right? You can build a pure land in it. There's so many things that you can do that essentially it's limitless. So if you are already in your practice and you're trying to deepen it, the best way to do it is to realize that you're not alone. No single person is. We're all part, an interdependent part, we would say in Buddhism, of the world. So get a community. There is this horrible thing, horrible sickness of trying to be your own island. You're not. You're not. You're just a person. You're not an island. You're not that piece of rock in the middle of the sea. You can use the internet. If you're hearing me, you have a phone or a computer. So use it. Use it. Communicate. That's my second advice, and I hope it's understood that it's meant well.
That's very precious. Thank you so much, Lama Fede, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for being with us today as we're discussing lucid dreaming with Lama Fede. Find him with some links that I'll post below if you have interest in following up with his studies, his Kula, Buddhism, and topics of this nature in general.
Oh, one last thing I forgot. I promised was going to recommend 3 or 4 books, right? That you can again that you can read. So first book I would recommend is a book of interest because it's a historical book. It's the book I was mentioning before from the Marquette de Saint-Denis, Dreams on How to Guide Them. It's very dated. It's from the 19th century, but it's one of the first primers in which lucid dreams appears a lot. Lucid dream term appears in the 1920s later on, but it's very interesting, the book itself, nonetheless. Then I would recommend the books if you want a just, let's say, more practical introduction. The systems by Charles Morey are very good. Are very good. I would recommend those just from Western perspective. And then what you might want to learn, because it essentially invented all the terms, it's Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming by Stephen LaBerge, which is absolutely brimming full of techniques. But more importantly, 99% of the terms which we use, dream recall, wild, smiles, what is the REM stage, they were invented by him in that book. So even if you do not practice his system, even if you dislike it, that's okay. But everything that you're going to read after that is going to make a reference to it, even if it's just to, criticize it. But it's like the thing that everyone has to read. So the Herbaceous and the Nays, the Morey books, and the Lovers books. I think those are the 3 recommendations I would do.
Thank you so much. Thanks
Yeah.
for as well. And Thank you, everybody who's listening. We can follow next time where enchantment meets enlightenment and follow along. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye bye.